Good afternoon, everyone. So let us today come straight away to Unit 2 from your literature text, that is from the Springs, and as you can see, this is my English class number 6, and today let us discuss something on a title called "Too Dear." Okay, so let us students, let us see what exactly are we going to study here under this, which is written by Leo Tolstoy. I'm sure all of you are aware, heard of this name Tolstoy, isn't it? Leo Tolstoy. Well, there are a couple of questions which I could ask you, but then since you are at home and you're just watching me online, so the moment we think of Leo Tolstoy, there are so many books that come into our mind, like whatever he has written, mainly War and Peace. You know, that bulky novel that most of you have read the abridged version or whatever, but this is a book that most of us would have definitely read in our lives, isn't it? So when we talk here about the author Leo Tolstoy, and he has written one more book called Anna Karenina. Heard of this? So these are the main two major books that I could remember, that I can even still remember the moment I look into this name here, Leo Tolstoy. Okay, so the title of the chapter, the title of the unit, or a story that we are going to read today or discuss is "Too Dear." Okay, so this word has a phonetic connotation with it in terms of the pronunciation. I hope you understand, or you are able to catch me what am I trying to say. So I'm trying to say here about this specific word, also this word which can be a homophone and which can also be a homonym, isn't it? To and to. Examples for homophone: dear and dear. You can make use of this word in two different contexts according to your understanding, or according to what the context is all about, isn't it? So to and too. So that is the difference between the homophone. The first word that I have written on the board is "too." Okay, so something that is too much, something that is beyond limits, isn't it? So something that is what can I say, something that is there which can be understood in the form of being exaggerating, or maybe something more than what you want. So that is why it is added with one more O to it. That is why it is "to" and "to." Okay, so "to" is actually a preposition which you all know. TO I'm talking about. Okay, there is one more word like, you know, TWO, the numerical, isn't it? So when we are talking, or when we are speaking about these terms, one should be always aware of the words and where do they belong to. In the similar way, if I come to the next word of the title, it is "dear." Dear is normally something which we make use of for the people who are loved ones, isn't it? Dear. To my dear father. So these are some of the examples that you can think of, isn't it? In the similar way, you can also think of so many examples with the word and what happens when you think of "too dear." Okay, so here is a story that you are going to read and understand about a small kingdom. What all the things that come, we will do it while I'm just reading you the text, and we will have a discussion on that. But before we could do that, let us understand something more about the author of the chapter, Leo Tolstoy. So I have already told you that the moment you think of the word Tolstoy, you will definitely come to know that he is a Russian, isn't it? A Russian writer. So let us read something about the author first, and then let us come on to what is he going to tell us in the chapter titled "Too Dear." All right, yes. So Count Leo Tolstoy, born in the year 1828 and he died in the year 1910. All right, is a Russian writer who primarily wrote novels and short stories. Okay, Russian by birth. Okay, and a writer who normally wrote the novels, also the short stories. Tolstoy is a master of realistic fiction and is widely considered as one of the world's greatest novelists. Okay, if you have read or if you happen to read something about literature, obviously in one or the other context you might have definitely heard of the name Tolstoy. So that's why I'm saying that he is primarily a person, one who writes the realistic fictions. Okay, realistic fictions. He is considered as one of the world's greatest novelists. He is best known for two long novels, War and Peace and Anna Karenina. I just told you before I started the class, like, these are the two books that will definitely come into our mind the moment you think of the name Leo Tolstoy. So what do you understand here? Russian, okay, and a prolific writer, one who mainly writes the realistic novels actually, okay, considered as one of the greatest novelists of all the time. Okay, then Tolstoy first achieved literary acclaim. He was first considered as a most prominent literary figure in his 20s, when he was in his 20s, for the work that is called as Sevastopol Sketches, which was released or which was written in the year 1855. Based on his experiences in the Crimean War and followed by the publication of semi-autobiographical trilogy of novels, Childhood, Boyhood and Youth. He is well known, remembered even today. When he was in his early 20s, he was the one who has actually talked about a Crimean War that was followed by the publication of his semi-autobiography, not a fully autobiographical, but it is a semi-autobiographical trilogy. What is trilogy? Three, isn't it? Three things happening simultaneously, or one after the other, or the consecutively. Now, trilogy of novels called Childhood, Boyhood and Youth. All these novels were written from 1855 to 1858. In the continuous 3 years, he has written novels on Crimean War, that is Crimean War, which was followed with the publication of his trilogy. The moment I tell you trilogy, you need to understand the titles of 3 books that he wrote continuously, consecutively. Okay, first one is on childhood, the other one was on boyhood, and the next one was on youth. Just remember, okay, I'm just reading what is there given in the text. His works also include 2 additional novels, dozens of short stories and several famous novellas. What is a novella? A novella is not a novel, but it is something which is a short story, but longer than a short story is called as a novella, isn't it? So this man Leo Tolstoy is known for all the novels that he has written. Okay, he is known for the dozens of the short stories that he has written. One such is Two Deer. Okay, one such is Two Deer, and several famous novellas. Novellas, not a novel, but something which is more in length when it can be compared to a short story or something. So known for famous novellas including The Death of Ivan Ilyich, Family Happiness and Haji Murads. I don't know if you have heard of these 3 names, but these are supposed to be considered as one of the best novellas that Tolstoy has ever written. Okay, the names are given in the text, you can just have a look at it. The Death of Ivan Ilyich, Family Happiness and Haji Murads. Then later in his life he wrote plays and also essays. Okay, he did not restrict himself only on writing short story or maybe a novel or novellas, but he is also known for writing so many different essays as well as plays as well. So Tolstoy is also considered as one of the greatest playwrights also. Tolstoy is equally known for his complicated and paradoxical persona and for his extreme moralistic and ascetic views. So what can you find in most of his work? In most of his work by Tolstoy, one can definitely find out the paradoxical persona of his own self and his extreme morals. You definitely tend to understand one or the other moralistic approach that he has towards his work. Whether it is a novel or a short story or a novella or a play or maybe a essay, you can definitely find morals, paradoxical values of a person, and at the same time you can also see some of the ascetic things, weaves of a person, which he adopted after a moral crisis and spiritual awakening in 1870s. So after 1870s, whichever the works that were written by Tolstoy were having merely an impact of his own paradoxical personae, at the same time all those works written by Tolstoy had a way of morals in it. At the same time it had ascetic, something relating to the god, weaves. Spiritual awakening in the 1870s, after which he became noted as a moral thinker and a social reformer. Okay, so because of his themes, because of his themes that he has in his novels or in his works, later Tolstoy was also remembered, or even till today Tolstoy is remembered as a moral thinker, at the same time social reformer. Okay, so this is what is being told here about the author Leo Tolstoy, and out of all his works, today we have one of the short stories written by this author Tolstoy, which is titled as Too Dear. Okay, I'm sure most of you have read, or maybe you will read it and understand, but when you actually think it in the terms of the way that we actually normally think of reading a text, you will enjoy it a lot. Okay, so title, author. Okay, so Too Dear is the title of the story that we are going to discuss today, and the author is Leo Tolstoy. Who is Leo Tolstoy? What are all his works? I have just read it, which is there on page number 11 of your textbook. Okay, so before we could start any text, our usual procedure is to definitely look into the pre-reading activity of the text that is given there, isn't it? So any poem or any lesson or any short story will definitely have something that is called as a pre-reading. That is, you need to have a broader concept of understanding. You need to set your mind about what are you going to read here. Okay, now here the extended activity or a pre-reading activity of the lesson is, what do you think would happen if, due to procedural lapses or delay, the court were to convert the verdict of death sentence into life imprisonment? So this is a pre-reading activity that has been given to you. The moment you or me read this, we will understand what is this all about, isn't it? What do you think would happen if, due to procedural lapses, if you have some procedural lapses or maybe delays in the court proceedings, where a court was forced to convert the decision, which is called as verdict. What is a verdict? Verdict is something that is a decision given by a court or by a judicial custody or by the law and order of any specific country, isn't it? So to convert the verdict of a death sentence into life imprisonment, these are the two words that you need to understand: death sentence, life imprisonment. Okay, generally understand, I'm sure you all know what is the difference between a death sentence and a life imprisonment. Here the verdict is both. The verdict that can be given by a law and order or by a court or maybe by a magistrate or by any judicial custody can be both. It can be death sentence or it can be a imprisonment. But what you need to understand here is that, have you heard of anything, or can you think of anything about when a court or maybe a king or maybe a verdict was forced to change to a person as a death sentence, which was later changed into life imprisonment? Okay, now this is a background to the story that you are going to read now. Okay, so here you will know, or you will come to know, a kind of a realistic view that has happened with the title Too Dear. You will come to know who was this guy, or who was this man who was very dear. Why was he too dear? All these questions will be answered the moment you start reading the text. Okay, now when we talk here about the procedural lapses or delays, heard of what is that, fast track courts in India? Like, recently there was a kind of a discussion that we had, like, India should set up a lot of fast track courts, isn't it? Why? Because the delays, if you have come across any of the situation in your life, or maybe you have heard about it, like, the delays in the court proceedings are taking very, very long time. But now, yes, the time has changed, and you have set up very fast track courts where a verdict comes out very soon, unlike it was in the past. So here is a story with the same similar verdict, where a verdict was forced to change from a death sentence to a life imprisonment. Okay, what is death sentence? You are hanged until death, isn't it? That is something which is called as a verdict, death sentence, so to say, death sentence. But on the other hand, life imprisonment, that is, the court or the jail or what cell or whatsoever should take a responsibility of a person, one who is guilty of doing some crime or whatsoever, should be put in the prison until he dies. That is called as life imprisonment. You know that, right? So just we need to understand what is a death sentence and what is a life imprisonment. After understanding that, here is a story which actually will tell you about some of the lapses or the delays in the judicial proceedings, where a death sentence which was given by a court or by a king, that so and so person should die and should be hanged until he dies, was later on changed into life imprisonment. Now this is the small introduction or a gist, or maybe a very small background to the story that you are going to read with the title Too Dear. Hope I am clear. So let us read. What is this Too Dear? Who was Too Dear? Why was he doing it? And what were the proceedings that were lapses from the kingdom or from the king or maybe from the court or judicial person or whatsoever? At the same time, why was this death sentence, a verdict of a death sentence, was later on changed into life imprisonment? This is what you're going to know when you start reading this short story. So having said that, let us straight away come on to something that is called as Too Dear by Leo Tolstoy. So you can look at the picture that has been given in your textbook. Okay, so the moment you look into the text, again it will try to tell you some of the proceedings, or it will try to give you what are you going to read about. So you can see that there is a prisoner, there is a prisoner, and you can also see that there is a man from the army, a chief or whoever, you can just think. Just look into the picture and try to imagine or try to understand what you can think of or whatever that comes to your mind the moment you look into this picture. So having said that, let us straight away go on to the story. Near the borders of France and Italy, on the shore of the Mediterranean Sea, lies a tiny little kingdom. Tiny Very small, isn't it? So, a very small kingdom called Monaco. Okay, so in the very first line of the short story, you have been told about the location where the story is happening. Okay, so near the borders of France and Italy, near the borders of the France and Italy, on the shore of, that is next to the sea, that is the name of the sea is Mediterranean Sea. Onto the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, there lied a very small kingdom which was called as Monaco. Okay, the name of the kingdom is Monaco. Monaco is a very small or a tiny kingdom which lies on the Mediterranean Sea, on the borders of France and Italy. So the name of the kingdom is Monaco. Many a small country town can boast more inhabitants than this kingdom, for there are only about 7,000 of them all told. Okay, now he talks to us something about the size of the kingdom. I have very clearly told you that it was a very small kingdom. The moment I say small or very tiny, you can understand. So, many a small country town can boast more inhabitants than this kingdom. That is, there were very limited number of inhabitants. What do you mean by an inhabitant? An inhabitant is a person, one who lives in a specific island. He is called as inhabitant. Okay, the main thing that you have to see here is that many a small country town can boast more inhabitants than this kingdom, for there are only about 7,000 of them all told. The number of inhabitants that are living in this small island or in this small kingdom were about only 7,000. Why am I stressing on all these one words is, remember the first main of your question paper. You would be asked a question from any part of the text. Okay, so you should be aware of all these facts. That's the reason that I'm stressing more on these words about the location, about very important explanations regarding the kingdom. Okay, so you should be remembering name of the kingdom, you should be knowing about where exactly it lies, on the shores of dash dash, whatever question may come from any point of the text. Okay, so any small country can boast more inhabitants than this kingdom, for there are only about 7,000 of them all told, and if all the land in kingdom were divided, there would not be an acre for each inhabitant. What is the size of the kingdom? It is very small. It is told earlier only, isn't it? So the number of people in the island or in the kingdom is about 7,000. Only 7,000 inhabitants are there. Okay. Further, he tells us about the kingdom in such a way that if the kingdom would be divided, or if it is going to be divided, then not even a single inhabitant would get a land not more than an acre. Means to say that small kingdom but with 7,000 population in it. Land in kingdom were divided, there would not be an acre for each inhabitant. That is, space is less, people are more. In that way it is. Okay, inhabitant. But in this toy kingdom, okay, he changes the name by saying Monaco, which is nothing but it is also considered as a very small kingdom, and at the same time it is also called as toy. Okay, so but in this toy kingdom here is a reference to Monaco. Okay, so in this toy kingdom there is a real kinglet. What do you mean by kinglet? Kinglet is nothing but a person, one who takes care of the entire kingdom. So hierarchy. Heard of the word hierarchy? Hierarchy is nothing but the order. who's first, second, something like that. The hierarchy of the order of the kingdom was also having a real kinglet. That is, there was a king, there were ministers. Kinglet is something that is associated with the administration in the kingdom. Though the kingdom was very small, though it had about 7,000 people in it, the kingdom was also called as a toy kingdom, but it had a real kinglet. So there was a proper administration that was happening in the kingdom. And he has a palace. The person one who takes care of the country, the person one who takes care of the kingdom, who is called as a king, was having a real kinglet. That is, king was there, ministers were there, and he would definitely used to listen to the people, his citizens of the country. So there was a proper administration in the form of a kinglet. Not only kinglet, the king was also having a palace. He had courtiers, one who assist him in terms of the administration. He had ministers, and he had a bishop, something relating to the religious ceremonies of the country or the kingdom, and generals, and also an army. So what do you understand from this paragraph? Though it was a very small kingdom, though it was a very small in size, but the kingdom was well equipped with all the things that are necessary for the administration of the country. That is, they had king, they had courtiers, they had generals, they had army, okay, they had ministers. Everything was with a proper law and order in the kingdom. Okay, so though Monaco was very small, but they had a kinglet, and the kinglet was all well supported by all the people who were required. He had his own, the king had his own palace, he had his own ministers, he had his own courtiers, the helpers, and he also had a bishop for all the religious ceremonies of the country, generals, and he also had an army, a small army. So when we read about all these things here, you can just try to imagine in your own mind, like, though the kingdom was very small with some 7,000 population in it, but still they were very much giving importance to law and order. Okay, and go back to the title, Too Dear. And here we are going to study something about, what did we do in the pre-reading activity? In the pre-reading activity, we discussed something about verdict, isn't it? We discussed something about the verdict of a king, or maybe about an administration, isn't it? In the similar way, all these things are something that are related to this here. So he had army, courtiers, ministers, generals of the army. Okay, he had his own palace. So these are the things that were there in the country. Okay, so country was very small, but it had around 7,000 population in it. Then he tries to tell us something more as we go further reading the text here, that though it was a very small kingdom, but look at the law and order that they were maintaining. So in this paragraph you will come to know about the hierarchy and how was it followed by the king. It is not a large army, only 60 men in all. Okay, you can just think, with the 7,000 population country, okay, they had an army, they had each and everything that was required for the administration. And here we see that yes, they do had an army, but the whole army was just comprising of 60 men. 60 men in all, but still it is an army. Though it was very small in numbers, but still it was considered as an army to their kingdom. There are also taxes in the kingdom. Okay, I hope it is all self-explanatory. So the moment I just read on, just follow it off in the way that you understand what is the what can I say, what is the thing that he wants to tell us about. Like, Tolstoy wants to tell us about the administration of the country in these words. There were also taxes in the kingdom as elsewhere. Obviously, when there is a country, we have something that is called as the taxes. Take an example of GST in our own country, right? In the similar way, even a country like Monaco was also having taxes. So, where were they levying the taxes? So, these are the commodities on which they were levying the taxes. As tax on tobacco and on wine and spirits, and also a poll tax. Okay, P-O-L-L, not P-O-L-E. Okay, so understand that the kingdom of Monaco was levying the taxes on its citizens on the commodities like tobacco, wine and spirits, and a poll tax. So these were the three commodities in which the tax was collected in the kingdom. Okay, the names of three commodities are one on tobacco, the other one was on wine and spirits, something that is related to the wines that we have, even we have here in India as well. At the same time, they were levying something that is called as poll tax because of the administrative procedurals or something that the government or the king was levying the tax on something that is called as poll tax. But though the people there drink and smoke as people do in the countries, there are so few of them that the prince would have been hard put it to feed his courtiers and officials to keep himself if he had not found a new and a special source of revenue. Why do you think normally tax is collected? Tax is always collected in order to look after their own citizens, isn't it? In the similar way, even in this small country like Monaco, people were levied taxes on the commodities that I have told, and at the same time the king had to pay to his kinglet, isn't it? He had to pay because he had members, he had people who were taking care of his administration. That's why the kingdom had a kinglet, a proper kinglet. So in order to pay for those people, he had to depend on these taxes. Getting on these taxes that were collected by the countrymen. There are so few of them that the prince would have been hard to put it to feed his courtiers and officials to keep himself if he had not found a new and a special source of revenue. So, poll tax is something that he had to levy on the people in order to look after the expenses of his kinglet. So, that is why he had put or he had levied taxes on tobacco, wine and spirits on one hand. At the same time, he had to depend on poll tax, which was actually for the expenses incurred for looking after his kinglets. That is the reason that he had to put taxes on poll. If he had not found a new special source of revenue, then this special revenue comes from a gaming house. Apart from those three commodities, he had one more commodity, or he had one more way of putting or taxing the people. And why he had to do that? In order to look after his kinglet, or in order to look after the expenses of his kinglet, in order to look after the expenses. So there was a special revenue that was coming from a gaming house. Okay, there was a special tax that was levied on the people in order to look after the kinglet. In order to look after the kinglet, he had one special revenue generation. Like, he used to generate the money in terms of tax, and the name of that particular gaming house where people play roulette. Okay, roulette is actually a name of a gaming house. Okay, so it's a name of a gaming house where people, they actually play roulette here. That is, the small kingdom people were used to go to a gambling house. They used to go to a gaming or a gambling house. Later on it is gambling only, which you will come to know, but it was called as roulette. Okay, so here people used to come and play, and they used to win or lose. Obviously, no, any of the gaming house, if you go and see, you got to pay, either someone wins or someone loses. In the similar way, the people of this country were having a gaming house called roulette. So the name of the game that he used to play was roulette. People play, and whether they win or lose, the keeper, one who runs this house, the person one who runs this house always gets a percentage on the turnover. Like for example, if I have to tell you something about some gambling house or whatsoever, okay, people these days are very busy playing the games online. In the similar way back in 19th century, if I have to tell you, people used to depend on, any of the things that were levied upon their system by the country. In the similar way, what was happening in Monaco was that there were 3 commodities for which the tax was levied. Apart from that, the king had a special revenue from this gaming house called roulette. Why? Because when people come and play here, okay, whether a person wins or loses, he had to pay certain percentage to the keeper, where the keeper will keep his share and rest of the share has to be paid to the king. And this is what exactly is the importance of this gaming house in Monaco. People play, and whether they win or lose, the keeper always gets a percentage on the total turnover. Like how many people came, what all the things that they played, they won or they lost. Whatever was there, the keeper, one who looks after this roulette, would keep certain percentage to himself, and rest of all the percentage has to be given to the king. Okay, and out of his profits, he pays a large sum to the prince. Prince is nothing but to the king who was ruling the kingdom here. Okay, a large amount of the money was going to the prince. Okay, the reason he pays so much is that it is only such gambling house establishment left in Europe. The keeper, one who runs this house roulette, okay, had to pay a larger amount of money to the king because it was the only roulette that was prevailing in the whole of Europe. Why? I'll tell you further. The reason he pays so much is that this is the only such gambling establishment. This is the only gambling house that was left in the entire Europe. Okay, so that is the reason that the keeper had to pay a very large amount of money. Some of the little German sovereigns used to keep gaming houses of the same kind, but some years ago they were forbidden to do so. Okay, because of some rule that came into this particular the continent. Earlier also they had so many roulettes, or they had so many gambling houses like this, but it was all forbidden. That is, all these gambling houses were forbidden, or they were asked to be removed, or they were not allowed to run any gambling house except this roulette in the kingdom of Monaco. Understand in that way. So that is the reason that he was getting a large amount of money from this house, from this gaming house of the same kind, but some years ago they were all forbidden to do so. So all these similar gaming houses were all banned, not only in Monaco but also in the whole of Europe. But this is the only house that was there in the kingdom of Monaco. The reason they were stopped was because these gaming houses did so much of harm. The reason why they banned, restricted, or restricted all these gaming houses, what? The people used to lose lot of their money. So that is the reason that the whole continent of Europe abolished all these gaming houses except roulette. A man would come and try his luck, then he would risk all he had and lose it. Then he would even risk money that did not belong to him and lose that too, and then in despair he would drown or shoot himself. I think these are similar examples that you have even heard or that you even hear every now and then, isn't it? So people go, they lose their money, and even after losing their money, they try to keep their own belongings like property or whatsoever, and even if they lose that also, the only reason for them is to end themselves, isn't it? So they would drown or they would shoot themselves. So that is why these gaming houses were doing more harm than the good to the kingdom, and that is the reason that all these gaming houses were abolished or they were banned in the continent Europe. But roulette was the only one that was there in Monaco. So in despair he would drown or shoot himself. A person, one who keeps on losing the money in the gaming houses, at last would find himself either by killing himself or drowning himself. So the Germans forbade, they put restrictions to their rulers to make money in this way. So the whole of the Germany, the whole continent of Europe, they brought a rule that no, all these gaming houses should be stopped. That is why they bought, or that is why they started abolishing or restricting all these gaming houses. But there was no one to stop Prince of Monaco, and he remained with the monopoly of the business. Who remained as the monopoly of the business? The prince or the king of the kingdom of Monaco. Okay, you can call him as the prince. That is what the text has been given. He would always been considered as the prince of the kingdom of Monaco, and he was the monopoly. He was the only owner, or he was the only king who was running the gaming house in his own kingdom. In Monaco only this particular game, that is roulette, was being played to his countrymen. Clear? So I'll stop here. I'll continue in the next class. Okay, so what I want you people is nothing but give importance to the title. Who's the author? What is the pre-reading activity? And then start reading the short story, and just follow it with whatever the terms of the discussions that we had. So I stop right now here, and I will meet you with you people for the continuation of this short story in the next class. Thank you.